Furthermore, additionally, on the other hand, an increase, like, yeah, we can tell, like, oh yeah, these are words that are used here to connect these sentences and such. But the way they write it, it's almost like invisible. But an examiner would detect, like, that's a very skillful use of this particular word or this particular language. It is quite hard to actually meet this level. Most people can do really well in lexical resource and grammatical accuracy, but this takes a lot of practice to get up, at least up to this level. For a lot of the majority of the students, at least getting up to this level is what we expect, like 80% to hustle. At least consistent, then we can at least confidently say, like, yeah, you will get at least band 7 in writing. Maintain consistency.
And the thing about what you mentioned about cohesion is that what words you use, they have to sort of make the idea flow on its own, as opposed to drawing attention to that particular use of the word or the symbol. So yeah, A-level ashata actually অনেক difficult because since it's a productive module, এখানে এসে you guys might have small errors. ওই একটা দুটো error জন্যই you're going to lose the band 9. You'll probably get 8.5.
Also, when they say rare minor errors in band 9, they're talking about like you accidentally forgot a comma or a full stop. Like stuff that the trainers wouldn't even notice. That's why they're considered slips, yeah. So yeah.
Right. I hope that answered your question. Please, if we have any more questions.
I think Fahim had a question too.
Sir, I am not very fluent in English speaking, so how can I improve my English fluency?
Fluency. How would you improve that? Do you want to answer?
So this is something that your sir probably touched on 2 classes ago, but again, just to repeat, for the speaking test, again, you don't have to have a huge range of vocabulary. If you have a limited range of your vocabulary, you can work with that. What you have to be mindful of is, as the speaking test progresses, the questions will get more challenging, right? Your pace of speaking will slow down, and that's something that the examiners will take note of. So a tactic that you could apply is sort of have a very consistent pace of speaking from the very start of the test. So by the time it gets to the second section and the questions get very hard, you can maintain that pace. It doesn't matter if you start slow, as long as you can continue on that same sort of path, you'll be good to go. And it's more about how well you can use your limited range of vocabulary to form coherent sentences. What that means is you need to practice on your own. I recommended this to you. Find another partner from the class. I would recommend watch a TV show or a movie without subtitles every couple of days. And then you meet up with your partner and then just discuss what you watch with them, purely in English. That's not only going to help you develop your listening skills, but crucially, it's going to make you more confident when you're going to be sitting for your speaking test. Because they're interlinked skills. How well you can listen and interpret what you're listening to is going to translate to how well you can speak it out to someone else. And that's what the speaking test is trying to test on you, all right? So yeah.
If you want a more traditional method of improving your fluency, adding to what Sir said, if you want to, the easiest way to improve your fluency is honestly by expanding your vocabulary. Because when we say we're not fluent, we mean we hesitate when we're speaking. For example, how do I say this? Like me talking like now, just a little while ago, it's because I couldn't figure out what words I wanted to use, because I don't know that. So when you expand your vocabulary, you have more options. As you have more options, you're more flexible. You don't have to figure out the perfect word. You already have a substitute, a synonym, if you will, to plug into that place so you can continue speaking. And that's the one thing you can do, that you should be doing, because it's a double win situation. You improve your vocabulary, you get points for fluency, you get points for lexical resource. So it's a win on 2 ends. Other things is to try and cut down on the usage of filler language like ers, ahs, and ums. In formal, spoken English, just stick to Better yet, if you get a question that you don't know how to answer, rather than using filler sentences, and it's not like at band 9 level there's no filler language. There is, but it's very minimal. if you do get a question you don't know how to answer, try a phrase like, oh, that's a very interesting question. I've never had someone ask me that. Could you give me some time? While you are saying all this filler language, you are thinking in your head what to say. You're giving yourself time. Don't just say this for every question, though. Oh, that's a very interesting question. That's a very interesting question. Vary it. Okay. Like sometimes in the speaking test, I got asked questions that I never got asked in my life before. So I honestly told the examiner, honestly, I'm not sure how to answer because no one has ever asked me that. Could you give me a moment? If I were to answer this question, in that very sentence I said and, but it was very minor. That's the thing. You have to learn, like, don't use filler languages. Try to cut down on that filler as much as you can, and this comes naturally the more you speak. That language-related hesitation that people have when they're speaking another language is because they're not used to the language. The easier it gets.
Yeah. So speaking at Juno, a practice test, you definitely need it, not just in class, outside of class as well. Our Sarjana Bolson, you use the filler language, you reduce it. What Sar meant was you use it strategically to buy yourself time when you feel like you're stuck. That's an interesting one. Use that to buy yourself time.
That's a filler sentence.
Yeah,
but it's English.
Yeah, exactly. All right, I hope that answered your question.
Size, you had one question for me. Could you ask the same question to the fact that you don't get a chance to speak with that many people, and that sort of has brought down your fluency level, even though you are from an English. Can you ask them the question that you asked me?
Yeah, what's the specific question?
So I'm from BPS. In the past 3 years, my family went to England, so I had no one to talk with. That's because I lost my fluency. So how to improve it?
So you're looking for ways on how to improve your natural speaking capabilities by yourself. Okay, so truthfully speaking, the best way to improve one's speaking capabilities is to have someone to practice with. But I understand with the current situation we are in, even though as things are getting better, it's a bit difficult to manage gatherings and have people over. My personal recommendation for those of you who want to practice speaking by yourself is that take a tape recorder, take your phone out and use the recording apps on your phone and try and answer some of the sample speaking questions. There's many of them. We have those from our own classes. I think you remember. You still have access to the classroom, so you can go through the materials and such. Practice answering those questions by yourself. Record it and play it back and listen to your own recording. And try to write down what you say word by word. Okay. If at any point in your own recording you're confused by what you're saying, try to note down where your issues are. Is it with fluency? Is it because you tend to make too many hesitations and that breaks the flow? And that's why you can't understand what you're saying to yourself? Is there a language gap somewhere where you don't have the words to fill in the gaps? Or do you struggle with making more complex sentences? If so, how come? Try to identify these mistakes, and as we identify them, what we have shared with you in class on how to tackle these specific issues and such, improving one's vocabulary, improving one's lexical resource or grammatical range and accuracy, implement that, and then a couple of days later, try answering the same questions again. See how you naturally improve. Fluency is pretty easy to work with, but it's at the same time very difficult. I just have to practice every day. That's the easy part. Practice 10 minutes. The hard part is doing it every day. If you honestly do this for 2 weeks, let's just say for the sake of...
I have 2 weeks in my hand.
You have 2 weeks in your hand. Try this for 2 weeks. You will actually see a natural improvement. Because it's something that happens very naturally. No one can teach you how to be fluent. You have to actually practice it. I'm only telling you the tools that you can use to practice by yourself. So do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that about covers it. And besides, yes, if you have 2 weeks, try it out. You have nothing to lose. Worst case scenario, you get a little bit of gain. Best case scenario, your fluency increases dramatically. So yeah, just really worth trying.
One really useful tip I can give you, and this is from an academic context. You have already done the listening module, right? Or have you not? You have some experience with listening? Well, don't worry, it's okay if you don't. Let me just briefly explain. In the listening module, we have tracks. Okay, in those tracks, sometimes there are 2 people speaking, sometimes there's 1 person giving a monologue. That one person speaking, giving a monologue is very similar to your part two, which is something a lot of people struggle with. Try to listen to how these people speak and watch how they use their own natural features of pronunciation and fluency to convey their meanings. Most of the times, these listening tracks, the audio files that play, the speakers that are talking, they're native speakers from UK, US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the list goes on. So by listening to them, and it's the same thing as Sir said, like watching a movie and whatnot. Though I personally find watching movies a bit distracting because you're using visual information to understand what's going on. When you're listening to just an audio file, so I'd suggest it to be a podcast. When you're just listening to an audio file, you are attentively paying attention to just the audio features to try and understand like how these native speakers pronounce certain words. So you have that imprinted into your brain, how they are naturally using pauses and hesitations to make them sound more articulate, how they use more advanced vocabulary and grammar. And by the way, native speakers don't always speak in long, complex sentences. If they did, nobody would be able to follow it for long. And even if you are a native speaker, no one can be 100% grammatically accurate all the time. Somebody will like, the question is, how much does it affect communication? So learn from that. That's the most complicated, not complicated, that's the most advanced tip I can give you, like using listening audio tracks to improve your natural speaking ability, understanding fluency and pronunciation in a natural way.
Does that answer your question? Please, anyone?
Sir, I have two questions.
Okay?
One of the sirs told me how the grading works, but I forgot, and I really wanted to know how they determine whether you get an 8.5, or you get a 9, or you get an 8.
Are you talking about overall?
Overall.
Achha. So, if you get let's say, if you get a 9 in reading, you get a 9 in listening, you get a 7 in writing, you get a 7 in speaking. I think that averages to 8. My math, yeah, that's so the thing is, I wish I knew how to use the board feature to like write and doodle on this thing so I can show it.
Yeah, there's a little thing.
A whiteboard, yeah.
Yeah, just, okay, let's see here.
Hopefully this works. Maybe less than ideas.
Oh, you can also, yeah.
Let's see here. So let's say after the averages of the 4 modules, your score comes to 8.25. If this is the overall band score, it's going to get rounded up to 8.5. This is the overall. Individually in writing, if you get 7, then you're stuck with 7. Okay, seriously.
Yeah, this, it's pretty finicky. Go back. Just do it slowly. I think it has issues with multitasking.
Okay. So, and if you get, sorry about that. So as I was saying, if you get 7, writing, that's your score, 7. If you get 7.5, then you're stuck with that score, 7.5. But what if somebody say the average of the writing score from writing task 1 and writing task 2 is, let's say it's 6.75. Now you might think, oh, that means this person's going to get rounded up to 7. That doesn't work like that. In writing by itself, if you get 6.75, it gets rounded down to 6.5. The same applies to speaking. If somebody gets, hypothetically speaking, if somebody gets 8.75 in speaking, that is still going to get rounded down to 8.5. Okay? Which is why in writing and speaking it's very hard to get 9. Because understand this, to get a 9 in speaking, that means you have to have 9 on all 4 bands, on all 4 assessment criteria. Maintaining that consistency is hard, even for people who've been doing this for years, all the time, that is. Because the speaking test and then the writing test is the only place where if you are nervous, it can actually mess you up. So that's like this is for the overall case. Overall score gets rounded up, but individually writing and speaking they get rounded down. And listening and reading it's just based on how many you get right. Hopefully that answers your question. Second question, please.
Sir, so this is about speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So in speaking, in the second part, they give us this card, right? With the
Task
topic
card.
on it, right? So there, do they actually penalize us or cut marks for going off topic?
No, but do try your best to come back to points.
Right.
Like, if I ask you about, let's say the topic is describe the time you went shopping, and you start talking about a time when you were younger and you went to the shopping market with your mother, and you were largely just talking about your mother and about her, traits and personalities. While yes, you are explaining that correctly, please do try and come back to the topic. The examiners won't penalize you in any way, but it's best to not go too far off topic. That's why you have those bullet points. Like, they want you to structure your narratives, what story you're saying on these points. Do you have to touch on all of them equally? No, not really. Do you have to touch them in the order they're given? No, not at all. But they sort of give a guideline for those of us who don't know what to talk about. So try to focus as much as you can on that. Play it safe.
So 9 is actually possible to 8.5. 9 is actually possible to 8.5.
To 8.5.
The overall score becomes 8.75, so they will upgrade it.
I'm talking about individually speaking modules.
No, the
For the overall, so
Overall.
if they get an
if they get
8.75,
yeah, that will
If they get 8.75, then it's possible to get a 9.
Yeah.
I'm talking about individually writing and speaking. If they get
No, I think you said that if 9 is not possible without getting 4 in all 4 modules, that's not right. I mean, it's possible 8.5 into modules.
Sir, you were saying about the assessment.
in writing, in listening and writing.
No, for the overall score.
Okay.
If someone gets 2 9s and 2 8.5s, the overall score will.
Oh, that's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Overall, it's possible.
Yeah.
I'm talking about this is individual.
Yeah, that's a
Okay.
comparison.
There's one question that some of the students often ask me. So let's say they come across a topic which they're not really very familiar with, or something they have never really done. So, for example, if your UCAT topic is that, talk about the situation, talk about the time when you had to lie to your parents. Maybe you will tell me that I've never lied to my parents, so what shall I speak about? What should be the response if that's the kind of situation they find themselves in?
So I have a very relevant example regarding this particular question.
Please. Please go by all means.
Well, guys, to be honest, the question that Sir mentioned about that is actually a very possible scenario. Like, let's say, for example, in my first writing task, my essay topic, and the writing task topic, that topic was regarding the jury system. So most of you may or may not know about the jury system because it is not that much seen in the Indian subcontinent, and it is actually seen in the first world countries, but not that much in Bangladesh or India. Okay, so the thing is that I'm going to give you an example about a junior of mine who is currently studying in Japan. So he actually sat for the IELTS twice. The second time was with me. So in the first IELTS exam, those of you, and you two and your friend, you did your classes with me, so you already know this story. So the thing is that his first IELTS test speaking tutor topic was solar system. So since you two know about this, you might also know about that. What is solar system? What is solar system? Solar system ke বাংলায় কি বলে?
সূর্যের তাপ থেকে যে জিনিসটা বলবো
সৌরজগৎ। আপনি যে জিনিসটা বললেন ওই জুনিয়র হচ্ছে গিয়ে এই অ্যান্সারটাই দিয়েছিল। He actually spoke about solar panels instead of solar system for 2 minutes straight. Surprisingly, and when he came back and he told me this story, I was like, you are going to fail in your speaking. But he actually got 6.5 in that particular speaking test. And in the second time, or I mean, when he was giving the IELTS for the second time with me, that was 2018 July. So the FIFA World Cup 2018 was going on during that time. So he was, I mean, when we were coming to Bonani, British Council office for our speaking test, he was actually asking me that, tell me something about your favorite brand. So I was saying, why do you want to know about this particular thing? Because it's very, I mean, it's very unlikely that this will be your tutor topic. But he still insisted, and I actually discussed with him about your favorite player. And surprisingly, that was the topic he had posted in that IELTS test. And what he did was, he was very fluent, he was very well with it, but he finished it in 1 minute 40 seconds. And actually that time he got 5.5 minutes speaking. So, can you understand where I'm going with this?
Sir, he was fluent. He had all
Yes,
the
exactly, he was really fluent.
Okay,
He was accurate, but he got less compared to the first one. Because when he finished it in 1 minute 40 seconds, I mean, it can vary from country to country or region to region, but in Bangladesh, the examiners, if you finish before 2 minutes, I mean, even if you are surfing online, the online information that you will get is that you have to talk for about from 1 to 2 minutes. They do not explicitly say that you must talk about from a minimum of 2 minutes. It's not explicitly said anywhere. But in case of the Bangladeshi examiners, what I have found is that they actually want you to speak for at least 2 minutes. If you go over 2 minutes, that's totally fine. They will stop you after 10 to 15 seconds. But if you are under 2 minutes, they will say things like keep up, go on, things like this. Okay, so the thing is that if you finish below 2 minutes, your marks get severely deducted. That's one thing. And so the thing is that for the solar panel, he actually messed up with the solar panel solar system, but he actually wanted to talk for 2 minutes straight, more than 2 minutes. So that's why he actually got more marks. I mean, the thing is that, yes, as I have already showed you, that for the mind, you have to have things like that, coherence, grammatical accuracy, vocabulary, things like that. But he was not targeting for mind. He was targeting for enough to get into Java. So 6.5 was more than enough for him. And because he didn't maintain coherence or things like that, he got 6.5. But if he wanted more, he must have been accurate enough. So that's the thing. If you are targeting less, fluency should be good enough for you. I mean, that's the last resort. And we don't suggest, like, topic is totally unknown to you. They don't actually give so much difficult topics or some specialized topics. Okay, what the topics they will give you, those are really simple and they should be known to any primary level students. So, in case if you are not being able to answer at all, just say anything close to that, as close as possible for 2 minutes, as long as you can. But the thing is that obviously they will, as I have already mentioned in previous classes, that they will have some headers for you to follow. Okay, so if you actually go through those headers when you have the cue card, it will actually be helpful for you to understand the topic more. Okay, so do you get the point? I mean, that is the worst case scenario if you are not being able to answer the cue card.
So sir, if we don't have anything to talk about, we just like focus on our fluency and how we present
The
it.
thing is that, yeah, if you don't have anything to talk about, just try.
Why you don't know?
Yes, exactly, things like that. Just talk. Keep talking. Just keep talking. They are going to check if you can actually talk. That's the speaking thing. You don't have to have the topic knowledge or any sort of idea. Just keep speaking.
No part of the IELTS test requires specialist knowledge. Part 2, sometimes you get less familiar topics thrown in your direction. But generally the theme of part 2 of the speaking test is that we get questions based on present or past experiences. And then in part 3, we get general questions asked on the theme of part 2. So like part 2, I can ask somebody to describe a time you went shopping. Part 3, I can ask you questions of shopping in general. Right? So it's possible that maybe you don't have a story about a time you went shopping that's memorable. One of my friends, they even got a question, describe an event where you were dancing. And he never had that, but he made up something on the on the go, like from some movies and stuff he's watched. And though he was able to talk for the full 2 minute duration, because he was making things up as he was speaking, he naturally slowed down because his brain is processing the information that he's coming up with. So it did cost him a little bit of influence. Not a lot, just a little bit. That's something to keep in mind.
Well, the thing is that in IELTS speaking, there are very few instances where you might be unlucky enough to be asked something based on your experience. However, other than that, in most cases, what they tell is that some sort of a general idea or a general topic. Like the second IELTS exam that I took in this August, my Q3 topic was an advice that you gave to someone recently and what the scenario was. So that was kind of an easy topic, even though it was my experience based. I mean, we give advice to people every now and then. And another friend of mine who actually sat for the IELTS with me, his Q3 topic was a street market. So I might have discussed it in the class that a street market that might be more common to us, the people of Indian subcontinent. It might not be that common to a first world nation president. Alright, so the thing is that if you are unlucky enough, you might get some sort of a crazy experience-based topic like where I say that a scenario where you dance. So those might be a bit difficult for you, but other than that, if you are not that terribly unlucky, you will get topics that are pretty much familiar to you or you already have experience.
And even if you are the unlucky guy who gets those topics like describe a time you dance or describe a street market you once visited, street market is something we can answer. New market, we've been there. But if, like he said, if you were living in a first world country, that would be pretty difficult to explain. Similarly, the whole dancing bit, unless some of you have gone to weddings recently. Right? But how do you tackle this? Truthfully, be honest about it. Like, explain whatever little knowledge you have on this as much as you can. Okay? Try not to repeat the same points over and over again because that will cost you marks in fluency. And if you don't honestly know a lot about it, talk about that. Like, mention that to the examiner. Honestly, I don't have a lot of experience with this because as long as what you're talking is somewhat related to the topic, you can still salvage some marks. Good marks. And then, yes, carry on.
Another thing is that in speaking, as you are making things up, you are completely free to make up anything you want. Like, let's say, if you say that I am a student by day and a serial killer by night, that's totally fine. They won't mind.
Still, just be a little cautious
Yes.
with that specific
scenario.
Yeah, you get the idea.
I mean, they won't give that information to CID or NSI, don't worry about that. But the thing is that you are free to make things up, but try to keep them as coherent or as on topic as possible.
I mean, as far as speaking goes, or unlucky or unorthodox situations in speaking exams go, I think no one's been more unlucky than I am, or maybe no one's been as unorthodox in the approach as I have been. But all three speaking exams that I had to sit for, I either got a topic that I wasn't familiar with, or I just felt bold enough to work my way around the topic as opposed to answering it straight. So what you need to keep in mind is you won't be graded by just the examiner who will be taking your exam on that very day. Your recording will go abroad, and there's going to be another examiner, or at least a group of examiners who will go through your recording, and you will be graded on all
examiners will be going over your recording, discussing together what your band scores ought to be in each criteria, and then a final score is given.
So with regards to my speaking exams, again, I wouldn't suggest it to anyone, but what I found is that even if you're slightly, let's say 30 to 40 seconds below the limit that they prescribe at the beginning of the part 2, you'd still do fine. As long as what you're saying makes sense, even if it's not directly on topic, but somewhat skirting around it, but you're making sense, you're very, very cohesive. Your vocabulary is excellent. Your sentence structures are very, very thoughtful.
Largely error-free.
Yeah, largely error-free. You'll do fine.
However, if the examiner did a sort of bullet that if here specifically, if you don't hit the 2-minute mark, you are in trouble. If you go over that, everything is fine. If you stop at like a 1-minute 30-second mark, which a lot of people have done in my classes, I indirectly ask them to continue by saying, "Can you tell me more about that? Is there anything you'd like to add?" That's my way of saying, you have time, you have to keep talking. If you don't, I'm going to cut your marks. I don't have an option.
I mean, no one is going to say those things to you.
Yes, in your own speaking, the examiner might not even be as nice as I am telling you, like, could you please go on? They might just...
So they'll straight up ask you, are you sure you're done? Are you sure you're done?
Is that
I've
all?
asked that 3 times.
Yeah.
So I know that's exactly what they'll ask you.
Is that all? That's their way of saying, please continue talking, the time is not up yet. Because if you don't talk for the remaining 30 seconds, they'll consider that this is your inability to speak, so you'll lose marks in fluency. And they will, that will mess up your overall pass score.
But have you introduced the other traders?
Yes.
Yes. So what I'm going to do, because I mean most members of our IELTS training team is here, so I'll be asked, and some of them has got expertise in listening modules, some of them has got expertise in the other modules. So I think instead of just simply limiting our questions to speaking module, let's try to
Yeah.
other questions you've got. Then I'll ask the individual module experts to answer their questions. Now, actually, I have a total of 11 trainers in my team. One of them is from Canada, another one is from Chicago, another one is from Metropolitan. So we have instructors training students through our online platform from outside Bangladesh also. But with me, I've got the Dhaka-based trainers. And I'm very, I mean, it's kind of lucky that I was able to bring them together to your classroom. And I think that the best thing about all the trainers that we've got here, virtually all of them have taken the IELTS twice or thrice over the last couple of years, and they themselves know what are the challenges that you will be having when you take that exam, whether it's in reading, listening, speaking, or writing. And in your classes, of course, they'll be sharing all their insights. But today is actually pretty, I mean, for me, it's a very exciting opportunity that you bring everyone together and to let them answer your questions. So, if Igor, if you could come forward and you could answer any question about the listening module, or she might share some of the issues she had when she was preparing for the exam. So, about the listening module, does anyone of you have got a specific question?
Any question regarding the listening module?
Miss, so for the listening module, it gets harder as you progress through, right? So at the very end stage, what do you do if, for example, you did hear the answer and you weren't able to like precisely tell what you should exactly write, but then he still keeps on going? So what do? Do you keep that in mind and then you still keep on going, or you completely ignore that?
First of all, there's two things here. The first thing is that you need to read the questions very clearly when you have the time. Now, there are some loopholes when you're approaching the listening module test, and most of the students do not use those loopholes in our advantage. For example, if you're taking the paper-based exam, you will always have 10 minutes in the end of your exam.
Your hair is touching
to transfer your answers from the question booklet to the answer sheet. Now, you're always going to given some time to revise your answers in the end of each section. Revising means you will definitely not going to listen to the audio recording twice. Maximum thing you can do is that you can check the spelling and you can check your grammar. So what I suggest my students to do not spend those revision time on revising your answers. Rather, invest that time on the next section to read the question twice. So when you can revise, when you're done with your exam, and when you're transferring your answers, you can check your spelling and grammar at the same time. 10 minutes is more than enough. So if you read the question twice, automatically when you're listening to the audio recording, you will not get confused about the questions or about your answers. The second thing I would suggest that our vision is the most prominent part of a human. So when you're taking a listening test, most of the times our focus is completely devoted to our vision is completely focused on the question paper. As a result, you get distracted and you do not listen to the audio recording. So what I suggest my student, try to close your eyes, extract the answer, open your eyes, quickly write it down, look at the second question, close your eyes, and then again listen to the audio recording. In this way, your attention will not get divided.
Can we rewind the...
No.
No, the audio will be centrally
Yeah.
controlled by the examiners.
In the classroom,
You have
you
only
have
one
access to the
choice.
audio.
No, there is no way to do that.
You have only one shot, and
The
this one
thing
shot
is that
will be
if
down.
you are sitting for the on-paper based exam, they will give you infrared wireless headphones, and that will be centrally controlled by the examiners. I mean, even if you are putting your head on the headphone and blocking the signal, you will not get the audio. So the thing is that before the exam, when they give you the headphones, they will actually play the audio so that you can actually check the volumes and the intensity and the partiality of the audio, things like that. So unless every single examinee of the room has declared that their headphones are working completely fine, they will not start the exam. You get the point? So this is because so that none of the students can actually complain that we could not have the audio or stuff like that, because they will not rewind. I mean, if you miss, you miss. No matter what excuse you provide, they will not repeat the audio.
Basically, there's an initial audio test that goes on for about 5 minutes or so, where everybody checks if their headsets are working properly. Your headset might be wired or wireless depending on the center. Okay, you have to check if everything is working then. So my advice is make sure so sometimes the wired headphones have this problem, especially in centers where the headphones are kind of inexpensive, where if you max out the volume, the headphone turns off. So check that. Because it happened for me when I was first giving my exam, that I maxed out my volume and my headset turned off. I couldn't hear anything, so I told the invigilators that this headset is not working properly. They didn't start anything until that headset was fixed and a couple of other issues were resolved. Again, another audio check, everything is working. Then they will start it, and at the very beginning of the test, even the examiner will tell you, this recording is to be played once only. So you get one shot.
And the thing is that, as Mahat said, that they will take around 5 minutes. Well, the thing is that in my last IELTS exam that I set for in August, they actually took around 20 minutes to check with everyone's headphones. Multiple people were complaining time to time that their headphones are not working, and even though when their headphones are changed, the new ones, they were also not working. So that was an ICCB Boshindala. So yes, it can go for a long period of time.
Just check if your headset is working properly.
Now, about the writing tasks too. Some of you have already completed the writing tasks module. This is a bit of a challenge. You have to write an essay on a given topic, and you are given 40 minutes. You have to write at least 250 words. Torima here, she's basically the writing tasks 2 expert. And 2 questions that I always get from the students is that how long should the introductory paragraph be, or how long should the concluding paragraph be? And there is this element that you have to present some arguments based on your real life experience from things that you have done or seen in your life. So how do I do that? Particularly for those of you who have just finished your HS or L levels, trying to think of an experience, trying to think of an example that sort of relates to the essay topic. That might not always come easy to you. I mean, I usually advise that you sort of make something up, but I think Tolu will be able to expand on these 2 questions.
Okay, so I'll be starting with that question, how to pull in your relevant examples and references. So by that, it doesn't mean that suppose the topic is about food obesity. It doesn't mean you're going to talk about your cousin who's obese just because he eats a lot. Okay, that's not the personal reference. What the personal references or examples are is a much more global based or worldwide based. More like to draw in statistics. To draw in statistics that before fast food chains were very prominent in Bangladesh, obesity was nowhere seen, or there wasn't something called obesity. The term obesity coined in Bangladesh most recently after the fast food chains became very dominant in our country. So something like that. So these are the examples, relevant references. So I won't expand on this much. First, I need to know more about yourself, and I wish to take questions from your side. So anything from writing task 2. To be very honest, by the time we start writing task 2, we're very exhausted. This is the last hurdle, last writing part, and it requires the most of our effort to come up with words, to construct sentences. In listening and reading, we just look for words or probably 2-3 words to make up a sentence or complete a sentence. However, in writing task 2, we have to come up with the concept, we have to come up with sentence variations, and also cover the topic in a relevant basis. So, any questions for writing task 2, probably? You think for a while?
I have one question. How do I start the introduction? So I'm given the topic,
Yes.
and I have to write an introduction. What should be, I mean, for tasks on it's pretty straightforward. You kind of paraphrase the question set. But how do I start if I ask you that, what should be the first sentence of my writing task to response?
Okay. So, the way we construct our introduction highly depends on the type of question we get. Suppose we're talking about educational systems, which educational system is better, online or offline? So it's probably it's not likely that you should start with kindergarten schooling. So don't involve that. First of all, try to create your scope. That if they are talking about online and offline and they want to know the advantages and disadvantages of learning platforms, how about start with how these two platforms came into work? Just 1 or 2 lines, or how online platform came and since when did it come. It does not have to be accurate. You can say online platform only started in Bangladesh since 2000 or 2010. It does not have to be real facts. So first of all, create your scope, create what you want to talk about, and then start from there. It's very common to start from farther away from the topic, but you need to create your scope to the relevance. So center your relevance. So I will start with that, and then obviously paraphrase the question that I have in hand. And the best thing is to keep reading the question in order to understand and understand. Because every time you read the question, you will understand a bit more about it. So introduction is introduction. Don't go over like 4 or 5 sentences because you'll have much more to write in your body. So if you have that structure ready, that these are the things I want to write in my body parts, try not to involve that in the introduction. No need to repeat yourself. Okay? And as I said, the relevant references and exampling and question and the conclusion part should include more like a wrap up. Mostly what happens is that people have a lot of time in hand for introduction, then body 1, body 2, body 3, and then all of a sudden they're out of time and then introduction in the end, done. So don't do that. Be a little more organized with your time management. It is okay if you have more time in your hand. It doesn't mean that if you have more time, you could have written more and you would concluded your passage, it means you get less marks. It just means that you have more time to refresh your answers. You have more time in your hand to read your answers and be happy with it. So always have that extra time, no need to panic. And the other thing about word limit is, the word limit is 250, but it says at least 250. So try to be around 250 to 70. No need to stretch it, like it's not Bangla, Bangla is na, so words will be counted, so concentrate on words. I think here our students have not come to the writing task 2 part yet, that's why I'm not giving much questions. But yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So you were mentioning about the the number of paragraphs that we need to write. Is there any ideal number how many paragraphs should be included in this?
No,
There is a bare minimum.
No, it's okay.
No. I'm just getting this ready because I'm pretty sure she has something to show.
No. I am not receiving much questions to show, but yeah, for body part 1 and 2, for writing task 2, you want to know the amount of body paragraphs. So there are no limits. However, it has to make sense. Like just for the sake of making paragraphs, you're jumping from one to you're writing 3 sentences and you're saying, okay, this is 1 paragraph. You're not going to be assessed based on paragraphs. However, the paragraph says that you know when to start an argument and end it. And so your next point can be another argument. So suppose we're talking about advantages and disadvantages. So you have probably 3 advantages but 2 disadvantages. So you will probably have 2 paragraphs for advantages and just 1 paragraph for disadvantages. So you need to rationalize, and it's up to you. The starting of the paragraph should be much more highlighted. So when you have, suppose, the type of linking word that you want to use, that you want to highlight, start with that linking word in the paragraph. Okay? And as I said, examples should be relevant. When you get more acquainted with the tasks, you will understand what relevant referencing or relevant examples are. So when you try to pull your attention towards the examples, you can start with, for example, for instance, something like that. So these are the words you could use. Anything more about writing task 2? I think that about
I'm going to bring answer. I think put your models familiar with the complexity of the reading passages. The 3 reading passages, you won't have 60 minutes to answer these 40 questions. Time is of course a bit of a challenge. It's not your favor. So when I took the IELTS exam, it actually took me 51 minutes to finish all the questions, and I got all of them right. I got a 9 out of 9, and I thought that was probably a record for Bangladesh. But then I met Masab, and he told me that he finished his 40 questions in around 29. So that probably should be the Bangladesh record. There's no doubt about that. So I just there's no shortcut method for this. I don't think Masab is going to be able to share any kind of magic formula with you. But I just hope he will be, I mean, very briefly, he'll be sharing his insight or how he approached the IELTS reading. Masab, just share.
Sir, I have a question regarding reading. So sir, you know, for the yes, no, not given, and for the true, false, not given, there may be certain instances in the passage that, you know, it's not given, like, for sure that this might have not been the case. For example, for between false and not given. So the other day I sat for a walk, and there the question was that turtles were amongst the first animals to go back to the sea. Now when you go back to the passage, they say that turtles were amongst those who went back to the sea. So sir, if it's not written that they were not the first, like explicitly, how do we know when to write not given or no?
The thing is, Urbi was in my reading class, so I actually discussed this. This is a common problem with the true false not given questions. The first thing is that you guys have sat for O-levels, right? English. So I would say that you guys, at least those who have sat for O-level, they have already experienced passages that are much tougher than the IELTS one. Okay. Having said that, the thing is, most of us actually, we think that we read, but we actually don't know how to read. Okay, so let me elaborate on that. What does it mean that we don't know how to read? The thing is, if I say, I have a yardstick and I have recently learned it, the thing is that if you can't paraphrase what you have read, you actually don't understand it. Okay, so let me repeat that. If you cannot paraphrase what you have read, you actually don't understand it. You are just pronouncing the word in your head, and we happen to do a lot. The question that you ask that about true false not given. For true false not given, the Bible, your Bible is going to be that I will not go out of the passage. I will never go out of the passage. I will not answer from my knowledge. Okay, that is the first thing. One of my sisters, she actually went to USA for her PhD, and during her reading practice, I saw she was a genetic engineer, genetic and microbiologist. So during practice, she encountered a passage that was about biology, and she could answer 7 questions to her knowledge. But even if you are that good, don't do that, because you don't know what kind of passages are there. So the question that you ask, it has to be explicitly stated that the tortoise were among them. I actually gave an example like the red green tree, for example, or the what was that? The Whomping Willow in Harry Potter. Okay, let's say the Whomping Willow is the in the statement after the passage it is said the Whomping Willow is the largest tree in the world. But in the passage it is said that Whomping Willow is one of the largest trees. Does that mean there are other trees?
Other larger.
So it's not explicitly stated that Whomping Willow is not, for the statement to be false, it has to be stated that Whomping Willow is a big tree, but there is another tree which is this meter. So in order to term a sentence as false, you have to find evidence in the passage that explicitly turn it down. Okay, like Shamra Shahjahan built the Taj Mahal. And in the passage you find that not Shamra Shahjahan, it was Ubaydul Qadir. Okay, so that the information is completely contradictory. So that is false. But if it is written, Taj Mahal was built in the time of Shah Jahan, but it was not explicitly stated. So you say not given. It takes a bit of time. It takes a bit of practice, and this kind of reading actually we were taught in O-levels, but because of we don't practice this often. This is called reflective reading. It's a very special type of reading, and it requires certain certain amount of skill. Yes. So I usually ask students to read books, but as it turned out, most of us don't. I love it, but most of us don't. So in that case, what you can do is you can read magazine.
like AL Daily, AL.daily, there's a website. They have some wonderful pieces of usually article on them, so you can subscribe to that. Or if you're into football, if you're into drama, you can read newspaper, and you can read certain section on newspaper that are based on those topics. Okay, so forming a reading habit is important to score a good grade. Could we have any other questions?